Where my grandfather called me out, so I had to go for a second. Okay, what happened? Why does this look so ugly, man? Oh fuck. No. Localhost 1000 React app. So I wasn't in here, but like 2 days I did React, so I'm in 15, like 7 a day type shit.
In the earlier videos, we have seen how a parent component can pass down props to its children components. Any data in the parent component when passed as props is available in the children components. Now what if a child component wanted to communicate with the parent component? Strangely, we still use props. But this time, we pass in a reference to a method as props to the child component. I am going to create a new file called parentComponent.js. Within the file, I will use the React snippet RCE to create a class component. Let me remove the named export, and in the component, I will add a constructor.
Why does this look so ugly, man?
Within the constructor, we set a state called parent name with the value parent. Next, I'm going to define a method greetParent. Within the file, I will use the React snippet RCE to create a class component. Let me remove the named export, and in the component, I will add a constructor with the snippet rconst. Within the constructor, we set a state called parent name with the value parent. Next, I'm going to define a method.
Wait. Import React from React. Okay. Into class parent component extends to like component is added, so constructor that take props. Okay, super allows us to use the feature of this, and here on this dot state makes a state. A way of doing that, parent name, let's do browse. Okay, in parent component this should be a render, bruh, render bracket return bracket div
and greet parent, which simply alerts hello followed by the parent name, which is set in the state. So hello concatenated with this dot state dot parent name. Now this is fine, but since we are using ES6, I would like to use template literals. So instead of the regular concatenation, we are going to have backticks, which is the key right below your escape key, and within backticks, hello, followed by the $sign and curly braces, and within the curly braces, this dot state dot parent name. Now please understand, backticks and $curly braces is a feature in ES6 and is not a feature specific to React. If you're new to template literals, please take a 5-minute pause, read about it, and resume the video. Also, since we are using this keyword in the method, we need to bind this method. So in the constructor, this dot greet parent is equal to this dot greet parent
Okay, what I want to do is not use AI, cause like I'm learning, so like AI helps me to learn, but still make me kind of lazy. So like if I get stuck in a same shit way too much, then I think I'm gonna use that shit. Okay, this is not in the fucking shit. What the fuck is this guy problem?
dot
Okay, it's in this to this the greet the parent equals to this the greet the parent the what the fuck is a bind, bruh?
bind this.
Okay,
I'm going to format the
bind.
code. I am going to leave the JSX empty for now and get back to it in a minute. Next, I will
let's not do this. Oh, thank you. And then parent component slash. Okay, save this it. And then what other thing?
And I'm going to format the code. I am going to leave the JSX empty for now and get back to it in a minute. Next, I will create another file called childcomponent.js. Within the file, I will use the React snippet RFCE to create a functional component. We don't make use of state in this component, and that is the reason I am sticking to the more simpler functional component. In the JSX, I will add a button that says greet parent. Now back in the parent component, I will include the child component in the render method.
For React from React and functional component shall PUNENT component bracket return and div button greet parent child component.
In the parent component, I will include the child component in the render method.
Okay, this is good. And then
make sure to import the child component at the top. Next, in app component, I will include the parent component in the render method. Parent component. Again, make sure to import the component at the top. Now, if I save all the files and take a look at the browser, you should be able to see the button greet parent. If I click on the button though, nothing happens right now. But what I want is when we click on the button in the child component, I want to execute the method defined in the parent component. Basically, the child component calls a parent component's method. And as I mentioned already, this is achieved using props. The only difference this time is we pass the method itself as a prop to the child component. So I'm going to go back to VS Code, and in parent component JSX, we add an attribute to the child component. Let's call the attribute greet handler. And to this, we assign the greet parent method. So this is going to be equal to this dot greet parent. Again, make sure you don't add the parentheses. We are passing a reference to the greet parent method as a prop called greet handler. We can now grab hold of this reference in our child component. In the child component, on click of this button, we simply call props.greetHandler. So on click in camel case, it's going to be equal to curly braces, and within the curly braces, props.greetHandler. Make sure to add props as a parameter. Let's save the files
Okay,
and see if this works.
I was thinking about that.
Go back to the browser, click on the button, and you can see the alert, hello.
No fucking hell.
Let's save the files and see if this works. Going to go back to the browser,
save to
click on the button,
okay, below that shit.
and you can see the alert, hello parent.
Okay. What happened is that okay, top level import React and component from React. That's it is normal, and import child component because we are using functional component from child component.js. So we import this here, and it is a class component. Name parent component extends the component constructor props super this dot state equals to bracket parent name equal dot browse this dot state equals to this makes like use state in of parent's name, and this dot greet parent that binds with this because class component kind of makes an error, gives an error if we aren't using this, so it's kind of tricky, but this is like not really required to learn because in nowadays functional component is more are used the most instead of class component to do this stuff. So like okay, then parent component alerts this the state. We need to use this the state the parent name, and render component greet handler gives the fucking function to that, and then it's shown that
we have successfully called a method in the parent component from a button in the child component by passing the method as props to the child component. This is something you're going to do quite often in your projects, so please do make a note of it. Now let's see how to pass a parameter when calling the parent method from the child component. And this is where an arrow function in the return statement is really useful. Arrow function syntax is the simplest way to pass parameters from the child component.
In arrow function we can't use this because of something
to the parent component. So let me convert the onClick handler into an arrow function. Parentheses, fat arrow syntax, props.greetHandler, but this time with the parentheses.
okay.
Now we can pass in any number of parameters to the greet handler. To keep it simple, let's pass one parameter, which is the string child. Next, let's incorporate this parameter in the greet parent method. So back in parent component, in greet parent method, we're going to receive a parameter child name. And now in the alert statement, we can have hello this dot state dot parent name from dollar curly braces child name. We save the files, go to the browser and click on the greet parent button. Go to the browser and click on the greet parent button. You should see the alert hello parent from child. We have successfully passed a parameter from the child to the parent. So this is pretty much how you pass methods as props in React components. In the parent component, define the method. On the child component tag, pass the method as a prop. In the child component, access the method using the props object. If at all you have to pass a parameter, use the arrow function syntax. By the way, you can destructure the props object in this functional component.
Yeah, I know that's
Now,
it.
if you're keen on event handling with form data, we will talk about that later on in the series when we deal with form handling. But for now, this is pretty much it about event handling in React. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys. When you're building React applications, you may often need to show or hide some HTML based on a certain condition. Luckily, conditional rendering in React works the same way conditions work in JavaScript. We have 4 different approaches and we will take a detailed look at each one of them. We have if-else, element variables, ternary conditional operator, and short circuit operator. Let's begin with the if-else approach. I'm going to go back to VS Code, and first I'm going to create a new file called usergreeting.js. Within the file, I'm going to create a class component using the React snippet RCE, and I will remove the named export. In the JSX, I will simply return welcome Vishwas. In the app component, I will include the user greeting component. Again, make sure to import it at the top. Now, if I save the files and take a look at the browser, you should be able to see the message, welcome Vishwas. Let's go back to the user greeting component and make some changes. I'm going to begin by adding a constructor with the snippet rconst. Within the constructor, call super and then define the state. I'm going to create one state property called isLoggedIn.
Okay, that's good. Parent child. I think we don't need this right now. And then we will come our
A constructor with the snippet rconst. Within the constructor, call super and then define the state. I am going to create one state property called isLoggedIn and initialize it to false. In the JSX, I am going to add another message that says welcome guest. So first, let's add parentheses and an enclosing div tag. Move welcome Vishwas inside the div tag. Move welcome Vishwas inside the div tag and also add another div tag that says welcome guest. Now what I want is the message to be conditionally rendered based on the isLoggedIn state. If I am logged in, the message welcome Vishwas should be displayed. And if I am not logged in, the message welcome guest should be displayed. Let's see how to achieve that with the first approach, that is using the if-else condition. In the render method, let's add the if-else condition. If this dot state dot is logged in, So if I am logged in, I need to render welcome Vishwas. So we're going to have return statement, a div tag, then welcome Vishwas. And the else condition, that is if it is not logged in, so else we are going to return parentheses div tag welcome guest.
It's prettier.
And of course, I'm going to comment out the return statement that we had before. If I now format the code, you can see the if-else rendering. If this state is logged in, return welcome Vishwas, else return welcome guest. Now if you take a look at the browser, you can see the message welcome guest is displayed. And that is because is logged in is set to false. If I now change it to true and take a look at the browser, you can see that the message welcome Vishwas is displayed. Now you might be thinking there's a lot of repetition and the render method looks crowded. Can we not simply use the if-else condition on the message being displayed?
Yeah.
The answer is no. If-else statements don't work inside the JSX. That is because JSX is just syntactic sugar for function calls and object construction. Adding if-else statements within the JSX is not valid. That is the reason we have if-else statements outside the JSX, and the entire return statement containing the JSX is placed inside the if or else block. Now a better approach is the second approach of using element variables. In this approach, you use JavaScript variables to store elements. This will also help you conditionally render the entire component or only a part of the component as well. Let's see how.
This guy just built an app while running the Amsterdam Marathon. Meet Tice. 6 months ago, he was just a self-taught developer, vibe coding with his voice using WhisperFlow for dictation, and he realized if he could build without
I'm going to begin by commenting the if-else blocks. Next, I'm going to declare a variable inside the render method. Let message. Next, we store the appropriate element in this variable based on the condition. So, if this state is logged in, message is going to be equal to a div tag that contains the text welcome Vishwas. Else, message is equal to a div tag that contains the text welcome guest.
Render.
And finally, we return this message variable in the JSX. So return div tag, and within curly braces, the variable message. If you now save the file and take a look at the browser, you can see that we have the same result. Welcome Vishwas is displayed. If you now save the file and take a look at the browser, you can see that we have the same result. Welcome Vishwas is displayed. Change is logged in to false, and the message welcome guest is displayed. So message is the variable which stores the element to be rendered, and hence this is the element variable approach. Now, although this approach looks much better, the third approach is even more simpler. And this approach uses the ternary conditional operator. The benefit of this approach
Bro, it's here. Oh fuck.
is that it can be used inside the JSX. So I'm going to comment out what we have done with the second approach. And now, within the render method, I'm going to add the return statement. And within parentheses, we use the conditional operator. This .state is logged in, question mark, a div tag that says welcome Vishwas, a colon, and then again a div tag which says welcome guest.
I know this.
Now how does this work? The first operator, this .state is logged in, is evaluated to either true or false. If it is true, the second operator is returned. In our case, the div tag welcome Vishwas. If the first operator turns out to be false, then the third operator is returned. In our case, a div tag that says welcome guest. I've just formatted the code and you can see the conditional operator. If this .state is logged in is set to true, welcome Vishwas is returned. If it is false, welcome guest is returned. Now we have is logged in set to false. So if I go back to the browser, you should be able to see the text in set to false. False. So if I go back to the browser, you should be able to see the text welcome guest. I change it to true and you should be able to see welcome Vishwas. So this is the ternary conditional operator approach and is probably the approach you might want to follow most of the time. Keeps the code simple and readable. Alright, the final approach is the short circuit operator approach. And this approach is just a specific case of this ternary operator approach that we have just learned. When you want to render either something or nothing, you make use of the short circuit operator. For example, right now is well nothing onto the screen or nothing. State div tag, then do that we simply return this dot state dot is logged in ampersand ampersand div tag welcome Vishwas. So what happens here is the expression first evaluates the left hand side of the operator. This dot state dot is logged in. If it is true, it also evaluates the right hand side, which in our case is the JSX that will be rendered in the browser. However, if at all the left hand side evaluates to false, the right hand side will never be evaluated as it doesn't affect the final value of the whole expression. And make sure to add the return keyword at the beginning of this statement. So return this dot state dot is logged in and welcome Vishwas. So if is logged in is set to true, in the browser we should have welcome Vishwas being displayed, and if I change it to false, nothing more approaches to controls, element variables, conditional ternary operator and the short circuit operator. For most of the cases, I recommend you stick to either conditional operator or the short circuit operator. They tend to be much more clean and readable. Alright, in the next video, let's take a look at rendering a list of... When you build web applications, a common scenario is to display a list of items. For example, a list of names, a list of products, a list of courses, and so on. So what we want is to repeat some HTML for each item in the list. In this video, let's see how to do that in React.
Wait, is there...
One of the best things about React is that it relies heavily on the JavaScript language itself and not introduce new methods to manipulate and render data. If you are an expert in JavaScript, you probably know that we can use the map method to quickly iterate over an array and return a new array with the desired changes applied. If you are not aware of the map method, let me quickly show you how it works. I'm here at the MDN docs for array.prototype.map method. You can see that the map method creates a new array with the results of calling a provided function on every element in the calling array. So in the example, in line 1, we have an array of numbers. In line 4, we call the map method on the array. The map method accepts a function as an argument. And of course, what you see here is an arrow function. There is one parameter called x, and in the function body, we return x multiplied by 2. The entire operation is then assigned to a variable called map1, which is then logged to the console in line 6. If I run this code, you can see the expected output. So what the map method does is go over each
brother.
list to create a new functional component.
Wait. Name. Why the fuck is the background noise there, brother?
Within the component, I am going to create an array of names. Bruce, Clark, and Diana. And in the return statement, I will add an h2 tag to display each name using the array index. Names of 0, names of 1, and names of 2.
You really like the
component,
Marvel,
I will include the
DC
nameless
universe.
component. Make sure to import it at the top. Now if I save both the files and take...
return names the map name to div to h2 comma index. The fucking hell, I didn't even export, bro.
Component, I will include the name list component. Make sure to import it at the top. Now, if I save both the files and take a look at the browser, you should be able to see this app. Go back to eval. So, as what now may return. The browser is keeping the able to see the list. You can do though,
Hell.
if you wish to, that is
I didn't need to
keeping
use
the
this
return
because
statement
like
simple by
everything
moving
name
out the
is
list rendering logic.
one time this, one
So
time
I'm
that.
going to declare a new constant, const name list, and assign the result of the map operation. Result map operation list, and assign the result of the map operation. Then in the return statement, I will simply include the name list in the JSX. So within curly braces, name list. Now when I format the code, you can see that it becomes much more concise. Just a personal preference which you can follow as well if you want to. The other thing is how simple our JSX is right now. Typically, you're going to have a list of objects with a few properties that have to be rendered. In such cases, it is always a good idea to refactor the JSX into a separate component and then use the component in the map method JSX. That sounded more complicated than it should be, so let me help you understand with an example. I am going to replace the names array with an array of persons. So, for each person in the list, we now need to render their name, age, and also their skill. We could simply render them in the map method with additional HTML. Let's start with that. Change name list to person list, names.map to persons.map, and name to person. In the JSX, we are going to have I am person.name, I am person.age years old, nothing restful. Snippet RFCE to create a functional component. Remove the JSX from the list component and include it in person.js. So the h2 tag, I'm going to remove it from person list and include it in person.js. But how does this component know what the person data is? It doesn't right now. So let's pass the data down as props
And
from
yeah,
this component.
props.
So in the list component map method, include the person component and passing the person as a prop. So after formatting, we have person list is equal to persons.map, person as a parameter, which is passed as the prop to the person component. Finally, in the person component, we can destructure the prop right in the parameter. So curly braces, person. If you now save the files and take a look at the browser, you should still see the same output. But this time, we are writing better code. The list component is only responsible for rendering the list, and the person component is only responsible for rendering the person HTML. And let me tell you, this is also the pattern you commonly see when building applications that render lists of data. We have the dreadful red text. We have a warning. In this video, let's talk about lists and keys in React. In the last video, we saw that when we render a list of items, React throws a warning in the console. Each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Or in simpler words, React is telling us, hey, each item in the list rendered using the map operator should have a prop called key, and the value to that prop should be unique within the list. So let's add that prop to each item in our list. I'm going to go back to VS Code, and in the namelist component, within the map method, I am going to add the key prop. To this prop, we need to assign a value that will be unique within the list. If I were to assign a string unique as the value, what happens is every item rendered will have the same value for the key prop. So the value is not unique within the list. Typically, the ID of the item is a great choice for the key prop value. You can see that every person has an ID property whose value is unique within the list. So we can assign person.id as the value to the key prop. So key is going to be equal to, within curly braces, person.id. If we now save the file and take a look at the browser, you should not see any warnings in the console.
Let's do a person for me, bro. Person.
Save the file and take a look at the browser. You should not see any warnings in as long as you know for sure it is unique within the list. For example, I know for sure the name property for each person is unique within the list. So I could have the key props value person.name. Now if you take a look at the browser, it still works perfectly fine. So the key prop is a special attribute you need to include when creating lists of elements. Now an important point to keep in mind about key prop is that they are not accessible in the child components. For example, if I go back to person.js and destructure the key prop and try to render it in the JSX, you can see that it is not rendered in the UI. If you take a look at the console, React throws a warning yet again. In the person component, key is not a prop. Trying to access it will result in undefined being returned. If you need to access the same value within the child component, you should pass it as a different prop. So what React is telling us is, hey, key prop is something I need to render the list efficiently. If you're trying to pass down a value to be used in the child component, pass it as a different prop. Key prop is reserved. So in any of your components, do not try to use the key prop to render any data. Alright, so we have understood what exactly is the key prop. Now let us ask the question, why do we need it? Well, it turns out keys help React identify which items in the list have changed, are added, room at the end of the list. How React handles this update is React just iterates over both the lists at the same time and generates a mutation whenever there is a difference. In our example, React will match the first items in each list and sees there is no difference. It then matches the second two items and sees no difference. And when it tries to match the third item, it sees that there is a difference and simply inserts the third item into the DOM tree. This way, instead of tearing down the old tree and building the new tree from scratch, React simply updates the tree by inserting the item at the end of the list. Nothing else has to change. Now consider the same initial list of two items, Bruce and Clark. Again, let's say we need to insert a new item to the list.
I know this, brother.
This of the user interface. Now, when reading articles or going through React tutorials, you're often going to see a lot of examples where developers use the index of an element as the key for list rendering. It keeps the code simple and elegant, and of course gets rid of the warning you see in the console. In this video, I want to show you how to use the index as a key when rendering lists, and also the problems you might face when used in the wrong scenario. I'm going to go back to VS Code, and in the name list component, I am going to add back the names array. Const names is equal to an array of strings, Bruce, Clark, and Diana. Let's render this list of names instead of the person's array. Const name list, name, which represents the array item in each iteration. Within the function body, let's return an h2 tag with the name as inner text. And the name list component now returns name list instead of person list. If we save the file and take a look at the browser, you can see that we are rendering the list of names. If we open the console, we of course have the error. But we do know how to fix this error. We need to add the key prop. There is one problem though, which we did not have before. We don't have an ID that uniquely identifies each item in the array. We could use the name itself as the key. So in the map method, on the h2 element, the key prop, this is going to be equal to name. If I save the file now and take a look at the browser, you can see that the error is gone. But what if there is duplication of names? Let's add Bruce again to the end of the list. Now the name is not unique anymore. And if you remember from the warning, the key prop has to be unique. If you take a look at the browser, you should be able to see a new warning. Encounter two children with the same key, Bruce. Well, it turns out the arrow function that is passed to the map method receives a second parameter, which is the index of the element in the current iteration. Let me show that to you. The arrow function will now accept two parameters. So we need parentheses, name and index. We can now use this index as the key. Let me along so render the key. Cause some serious UI issues in certain scenarios.
I know this, brother.
Such scenarios, I have modified a CodePen example from the React docs. The link will be in the description. At the very top, we have 4 buttons. Add a new item to the start of the list, add a new item to the end of the list, sort the list by earliest created date, and finally sort by latest created date. Below that, we have a table with the headings to add the index of the item in the list. Render. Add a new item to the timestamp is also present. Let me add a value of 2. Similarly, if I add another item to the end of the list, we see the same behavior. Everything works as expected. Now what should happen if I add a new item to the start of the list? For the new item, I would expect the index to be 0 because it is at the beginning. The ID, however, should be incremented, so it should be 4. The value should be empty and there should be a new timestamp. Pay real close attention. When I click on Add New to Start, you can see that a new row is inserted. But it doesn't quite work as we expected it to. We expected index to be 0, so that works. We expected ID to be incremented to 4, so that works as well. The timestamp is new, so that also works. But we expected the value to be blank or empty. Instead, it has a value of 1. And the last item in the list, which previously had a value of 3, is now empty. This is the problem of using the key as index. Let me show you how React interprets the update. Initially, we have the 3.0 and index of 0, which effectively creates a key with a value of the React with also the time. Click value as key in the arrows. Do that. Well, it turns out you can use the index as a key provided your list satisfies certain conditions. The first condition is that the items in your list do not have a unique ID. If the items do have a unique, the lists are filled on user inputs. When your list. Alright guys, in this video, we are going to learn the basics of styling and CSS when it comes to React. There are a couple of options to style React components. The first one is regular CSS style sheets. The second one is inline styling. Third, we have CSS modules. Fourth, we can use CSS in JS libraries, which work really well with React. In this video, we are only going to cover the first 3 approaches. Learning a CSS in JS library would be a separate series in itself, which I would like to cover sometime in the future. But if you're keen on using a library for your project, I would recommend styled components. Alright, let's start with the first approach, using regular CSS style sheets. I'm going to go back to a new.
I know
this. Within the file, I am going to create a class, primary, and set the color property to orange. Now, to be able to use this class in our component, we will have to import it. So in style sheet component, import /mystyles.css.
CSS and then
Now on the h1 tag, we can specify the class using the class name attribute. Class name is equal to primary. If you save the file and take a look at the browser, the text should appear in orange. And you can also conditionally apply a class based on props or state of the component. For example, let me pass down a prop called primary and set it to false. So on the style sheet component, primary is equal to false.
This shit is a component, brother. What the fuck is you talking about? Let's do this. Wait, I need a bathroom break. Wait a minute.